Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Janet Walden. I'm the CEO of the Center for Collaborative Solutions. We're CCS. We're a nonprofit founded in 1991, and our focus has always been projects to support public education. And strengthening out of school time has been an active part of our work for 20 years now, and we're excited to bring you this webinar today featuring brilliant after-school expert Andy Fletcher, along with the also brilliant Bruno Marchesi. It has been my privilege to work closely with both of these wonderful and dedicated people for many years. I wanted to mention that this is our fourth in a series of webinars that CCS has been offering this year, and they're covering a range of topics in our areas of focus. So please go to our CCS website to access all the webinars, and Kim is going to place the link into the chat over here. So just a little bit of logistics before we get started. This afternoon, Andy and Bruno are going to speak for about an hour, and then they'll answer your questions for the rest of the time that we have together. So please enter your questions in the Q&A. There's a button there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Enter them as you think of them throughout the conversation, and we'll get to as many of them as we can during the session. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Andy and Bruno. Where do I start with Andy? Writer, leader, consultant for some of the best after-school programs as well as for statewide initiatives, and author of significant publications that are life-changing roadmaps for program quality and sustainability. The depth and commitment and wisdom that Andy has are simply unparalleled. We are sure looking forward to hearing all that she has to say to us about whole child health and wellness. And Bruno Marchesi will be interviewing Andy. And Bruno's currently the California State Director for the U.S. Soccer Foundation. He has a rich history in the whole child arena, working many years in the expanded learning field in significant both local and statewide roles, where he has contributed so much to the field. Thank you both for being with us today, and I'm handing the mic over to Bruno now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. We are so excited to be having this conversation and sharing these thoughts with you today. And Andy, I must tell you, this is a dream come true for me to be able to have this conversation with you. We've known each other for so many years. So let's start there. Let's take everyone back to let's say the mid 1990s when I first met you, and you were leading at that time the Sacramento START after school program. What was your vision? What was in terms of what these after school programs could contribute not only to students, their families, but the entire community?
Well, first, let me say thanks so much to you, Bruno, for having me on this webinar. It's been a joy to have you and Janet and so many others in my life for all these years, doing such great work and really making a difference in the world. So thank you so much. If I look back to my years at Sacramento START, I think the vision was pretty clear from the beginning. Sacramento START, the START part refers to students today achieving results for tomorrow. And when I became involved with that, very fortunately, I began to see and working in the lowest income communities throughout the greater Sacramento area that there were incredible challenges, many of which I really was not familiar with. And I saw this more and more as an opportunity, not only to make a difference in children's lives by providing them with opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have, and keeping them engaged and excited about learning during the after-school hours and so on. But I also saw it as a way to build the capacity of families to become more financially self-sufficient, because of course all of our programs were offered free of charge, and to build their skills by hiring folks from the neighborhood. And this has remained something very, very powerful and important to me, that we look at things from a more comprehensive kind of a vantage point. And then in turn, as families benefit from this, communities do as well. So I really was looking towards thriving communities in which children and their families would have opportunities that wouldn't be otherwise available.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Andy. You know, when I think about the Sacramento START program, say in the mid 90s and the 2000s, it was modeled after LA's Best with the great Carla Sanger there, your colleague. And you know, when I think about the latest data that I have seen of LA's Best now, serving 25,000 young people every day. I saw data that said that 88.5% of their students that they serve are students of color. And more importantly, their staff represents the same demographics of their students. It is an incredible effort to be able to hire from the community and really build an entire community from the ground up through these after school and summer learning programs. So let me ask you, let me take you back a little bit, and I have a gem for you here today. This is the guide, the original guide to developing exemplary practices and after school programs, which you wrote and published in 2005. You know, why did you write this in the first place? And, you know, a lot of us, like myself, have been using this for years. I still keep it in my bookshelf. What was the reason or purpose behind putting this out?
Well, you know, I think that was one of the things that we're very excited about when Janet and Center for Collaborative Solutions and I began working together in 2000. That we really had opportunities through what we then called the California After School Partnership to be able to provide the support that programs needed to be able to excel, regardless of, you know, where they were located throughout the state, whether they were urban or rural, you know, what kinds of populations they had and how much money they had. What could we do? What could we find out that would make a difference? And so we brought together 14 multi-site programs with, you know, some experience with them, that we knew they were doing good things and they knew they were eager to learn how to do more. So we brought them together in a 2-year learning community where we met regularly around the state and we learned from them. And so out of that, I was fortunate enough to be able to write that guide. And of course, it's not just me who wrote the guide, it was also Sam Piha and Reba Rose who were engaged in it as well. So this was a collaborative effort. We focused on what we called exemplary practices. And I think that was a really well-chosen title because I think philosophically, I'm much more in tune with the concept of practice than I am with the term standard. And the reason for me is that I've always thought of standards as something against which we sort of held or measured ourselves. I'm more interested in, you know, in whatever I do, and looking at what it takes to do that. How do you do it? How do you get to high levels? And why is that important? And I think if you understand those two things, it really matters. Excuse me. The other thing about the word exemplary is that I consider exemplary to be a verb. And that means that we are working towards something. I sort of reject the notion of best practices on the grounds that we're going to continually get better ideas and new ideas and learn from each other to make a greater difference. So no, it's not best. These are exemplary. And as we've looked at what's happened over the years from the time of the publication of that guide, boy, have we learned a lot. And so, there are subsequent kinds of things that we'll be talking about today with the Healthy Behaviors Initiative and others that, it's just a continual growth process. And frankly, Bruno, that's what keeps me excited and in the game, that I learn from people every day. I love what I learn and experience. I love to share it. And I just am thrilled with how far we've come in the last several years.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andy. I'm glad that you mentioned Sam Piha and Reba Rose, such inspirations along with yourself who have inspired an entire generation of folks that have grown up in the field of after school and summer learning programs, such as myself. I recall being a site coordinator in an after school program in Sacramento, and you kept coming by with resources and ideas. But what I remember clearly, and that was my formative years in after school and in education, was those infamous site visits with all of those legislators, which at the time I did not really fully comprehend that they were legislators and that they were out to visit. But what I remember the most when we talk about creating a powerful vision, is that you didn't just ask them to meet you at the school site. You actually came with them so that you can drive through the neighborhood of where the young people and the students would come to the after school program, so that they can see the entire environment of the neighborhood and not just the site. What can you tell us? What do you remember about those site visits or that particular after school program in which I was fortunate enough to be in?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I really think of is that when Carla and I and then Assembly Member Deborah Ortiz introduced the legislation for what became the ACES program, we really realized early on that that was going to be a real struggle, that it was going to be hard. We had a lot of opponents, interestingly enough. Department of Education opposed. Department of Social Services opposed. And we thought, what is wrong with these people? And I think what was wrong was they, sort of lived in silos, and they didn't want a whole lot more work to have to do. So we managed to get through that. That was an extremely interesting year-long process, basically, to do that. And boy, I'll tell you, when you've gotten people to commit to doing something and you really passionately believe in it, then you're going to do everything you can to inform them about the impact that these programs have and why it's in their best interest, whether the Republicans or Democrats, left wing, right wing, whatever. So the impact became terribly important to me. And taking these folks, these legislators and others, in a van, to the sites, gave us an opportunity, as you said, to weave our way through the communities, because a lot of these legislators, frankly, had never seen communities like these in their districts. And I wanted them to see and feel. And so we talked about it as we went. This is a house where, 2 nights ago, there was a drive-by shooting. This is a house that has 8 people living in it, and it's 1 bedroom. This is a house where, people are struggling, and they deserve to have better. And we can make it happen for very little money. So, that was all part of it. Let me also add, Bruno, I came to your site a lot because you were genius about running a site. And I could count on you every single time that, you just were magnificent as a site director. And of course, later on in the work that you've done as well. But, it really, really matters when the stakes are so high to really introduce the first legislation in the United States to do this. There was no way that I wanted to take any chance that anything could go wrong. And of course, visiting your site meant nothing was going to go wrong. So a lot of the credit for this legislation goes to you.
Thank you, Andy. And I'm glad that you mentioned about learning the entire story of the entire neighborhood, because I have seen through this pandemic how we are starting to learn again or reassess what actual needs community members are dealing with, whether it's access to technology or troubles with Wi-Fi or having, a quiet space at home to be able to do distance learning, food security issues. We're dealing with reevaluating what are basic needs for young people as it relates to education and academic success. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I also want to, tell our viewers that, based on those site visits, then is what the legislation that became then after school or ACES, in after school education and safety, which was the original $550 million of public funds allocated by the state of California to Governor Schwarzenegger that were supposed to start in 2000, that started in 2006, right? But within that framework of time, you were still doing some work with the Center for Collaborative Solutions. And at some point, I would love for you to tell our viewers the story of, how the Healthy Behaviors Initiative came to be, which was around that time, 2005, 2006. What did Janet Walden have to say to you? What did she offer you? What was that conversation like?
Well, a couple of things happened, and let me go back just a little bit before that to sort of set the stage on this. When the original legislation passed, we were thrilled, obviously, and there were, just a handful really of programs that were funded in the beginning, because that was a gradual move up from what we did to that 121 million, 550 million, 730 million today. But it was a process in doing that. So I decided in early 2000 that, if we're going to make this thing work around the state, we've really got to not only inform people about the possibility of what they, could become engaged in, but we had to do this in a really intentional, strategic way. I couldn't do this alone. I certainly couldn't do it while I was running Sacramento Star. And so I decided to go into consulting. Well, the problem with going into consulting is I'm one person. And so I felt, a team. And I also needed a nonprofit organization to be part of. And so I went to Janet Walden, who had done an evaluation of Sacramento Star for me. She had been one of the participants in that. And I said, hey, what do you think? You want to throw in on after school and have that become part of your organization? And she agreed, and it was like just opened an entirely new world. So we then sort of put together, with the help of a lot of people, the after school partnership that I mentioned earlier. And they put out, and I think this is important for what I'm going to talk about with Healthy Behaviors Initiative. They put out an application for people to apply for $150,000 to be able to support the, to help people really understand what the legislation was about and how they could access it. So I talked to Janet and I said, 150,000 is never going to work. This is not reasonable. It's not appropriate. We got to ask for $1 million. So we wrote a proposal based on $1 million and said, we want, this is going to take $1 million to do it. We're going to help you raise the money. We work with a foundation consortium with 10 of the leading foundations in California and beyond. And they said yes. Now, my point in saying this is a lot of this wouldn't happen if we hadn't thought big, and it's a gamble. They could have said, no, we just got 150,000, that's it. But they went for it, and that changed the landscape of everything. So we went from that to doing the Regional Learning Centers Initiative, which brought people together to develop those exemplary practices we talked about. And then one day, Janet came to me and said, I think we should get involved in something else. And I said, okay, we're doing a lot of work right now, whatever, what's the something else? And she said, well, I think it's the healthy behaviors of kids, and it's the childhood obesity crisis. And I have to say, when she said that, I thought, oh no, one more thing. I'm going to have to say that was really my first kind of response was, oh, I'm thinking of this, oh gosh, I'm really busy working on things that will help programs become sustainable financially and develop balanced and diversified funding. And gosh, there's a lot of quality issues still. There's so much going on. Do we really want to do this? And she said, well, give me a chance, give us a chance. And I want you to read some stuff. So she sent me the research. I read the research, and it was an aha moment in an incredible way. I had no idea how pervasive the childhood obesity epidemic was in this country. I had no sense that 1 out of every 3 children was likely to acquire type 2 diabetes, or that among children of color, who were the most largest segment of the population we worked with, 1 out of 2 of them And I had a vision or visualization in my mind of all the kids that I'd seen at all the sites that I'd visited and with programs that I'd worked. And I thought, oh my God, I can see these children. And even though they look okay, you know, I mean, they do look okay. They don't look like they're necessarily overweight or any problems of that sort. There's a real issue here. There's a real issue. If this is what the data tells us, there's an issue. We got to do something. And so I became passionately involved in that. We've got to do something. This is one of the things that expanded learning programs can really be a driving force in.
Yeah. So Andy, you know, you're taking me back, because when you mentioned the original regional learning centers, you know, now we have a lot of, you know, iterations of that, the regional hubs and innovation centers and regional learning centers and all of those things. But the original learning centers, you know, when I think about the list of people who were leading those centers, you know, I think of people like Diego Arancibia, who is now leading the efforts at ASAP Connect, a statewide technical assistance provider. I think about Carlos Santini, who's leading things at, you know, the After School All-Stars. I think about Tia Dwyer, who is the chief operating officer at Think Together. You know, those were the site coordinators at that time who were in charge of these learning centers, who then made careers in the expanded learning field and beyond through the experience that we gained through these learning centers. And I think that that is something that needs to be said quite a bit about the power of extended learning, is that, you know, I know folks, some of the folks here that are in attendance that were students in the program became site staff and move up their way to leadership positions and are still in the field. So that is always very valuable. And then obviously we want to take us back to then the original Healthy Behaviors Initiative guide, which was published in 2010. You know, but you had done some work prior to that in 2007 with all the learning centers and all the learning. So I want us today to walk through the actual practices. So if we could start with practice 1, which is about approach program development in nutrition and physical activity with vision, purpose, and intentionality. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think this is the most important thing, and I think it's very often overlooked. I have done hundreds of workshops where I've asked folks in the audience, what's your vision for your program? And in many cases, they don't know. Or they say they start reading something to me, or they whatever. And then those who do have some notion always talk about it. Our program does this, that, or the other. And programs do great stuff. I think that my whole conception or my perception of what a vision should be is it's something that gives us a real understanding of the future that we want to co-create. Okay, that it drives what we do. It gives meaning and purpose to our lives. I am still doing what I do at 76 because I still hold the vision for what can happen, not just with healthy behaviors, but with programs in general and with social justice throughout our society. And I think we have to have that. When I've talked to so many leaders in this field and in others, and I ask them, why do you do what you do? They almost always say, because it gives meaning and purpose to my life. It enables me or provides me with the opportunity to make a difference. And I think that's what a vision does. It captures our hearts, our imagination, and then it drives us to do things that we might think are, it can't be done. Of course it can be done, because we're going to find a way to do it.
Yeah. So Andy, you know, like I do trainings, I still do trainings around the country. And, you know, the first question that I always ask in any training is, tell me the name of your program and do you know your mission statement? And, I got to tell you, not a lot of people can tell me their mission statement or their vision statement. A lot of people, I tell them, well, can you find it somewhere? Is it on your phone? Is it a picture? Is it on your website? Do you know where it's at? And then they pull out this 2 to 4 paragraph thing that's supposed to be their vision and mission. What do you say to people that just needs to have have clarity in mind and heart about their vision and or mission to make it easy and simplify for them to just know what it is so that they can get there?
Well, let me say this. I always recommend if you have a vision statement, get rid of it. And I don't say that lightly. A vision statement written down on a piece of paper is not written in the heart. And a vision is always an emotional, heartfelt thing that really, really matters. So I think the whole notion of write a vision statement, all those years that people were talking about, you've got to have a vision statement. No, you don't have to have a vision statement. You have to have a vision. And a vision has to be simple enough that anybody can understand it. So, for example, at START, our vision was we're going to build the capacity of children to succeed. Anybody can remember that. And the second thing is you've got to leave enough room in a vision, in my view, for people to understand it and to embrace it from their own emotions and their own perspective, and then be able to talk about it. What does it mean? When they get into more depth and detail, they can come from their own place. Okay? This is not something we impose on people. It's something we try to connect with so that they buy into it. Because if they don't buy into it, it's not a vision that makes any sense. It's not living. And it needs to be alive to drive what we do and why we do it.
So, Andy, I often think about, how a vision can be, something that comes from the heart, and then how I try to put it into perspective for partners and programs is, as long as they have clarity that they can choose a lot of vehicles to get there, right?
True.
Building the capacity of children to succeed. And you can do that through food security,
Absolutely.
through, academic enrichment, through support and safety, right? You can do it through a lot of different vehicles, but being clear on what the end goal is, right? What would you say? Is that the way to approach things?
I think it is. I think it is. We're all different. We all have, but deep down, I believe that we all have, this need to have a purpose in life. I really, really believe that. And that's going to be different. I mean, there's variations on everything for that for people. So let's give people the freedom to express that in the way that they want to. Okay. But there is also a reason for that one sentence or that one brief thing that people can remember. It's a way to hold ourselves accountable. And I used to say, and I'm sure you were one of the people who heard it when you were at START, look, if you want to know whether you're doing the right thing when you're making decisions in your program, ask yourself, is this building the capacity of children to succeed? If it is, do it. If it is not, stop. Don't do it. Look at what the impact is. And this can be whether you're working with children, you're working with adults, you're working with partners, it doesn't matter. That it really comes down to, it's a way to hold ourselves accountable for what we do. And I think that's critically important.
And that's really the gut check, right? So instead of micromanaging folks, instead of, asking all the time, why is something being done, just being clear, organization wide about the vision, then you can have site coordinators at the site making decisions in real time to something that is tangible, that they can answer themselves. Am I doing this? Is this building the capacity for children to succeed? If not, then I need to stop because I shouldn't be doing this during paid time, right? It's an easy gut check. I've been doing a lot of work around core values the last few years, and it's exactly that, right? If you know what the end goal is, it's something that's not driving you there, we should stop doing it right away and do something different. I appreciate that, Andy. So let's go to practice 2, because this is the one that I think we're going to spend a lot of time in, because at what point, at some point, things go in circle in education. We used to call it youth development, then now is social and emotional learning. We've called it a million things, but practice 2 was really about integrating nutrition and physical activity approaches with a youth development principle. And the one that really caught my attention, Andy, that I want you to speak on is focus on hands-on experiential learning. What can you say to us about that?
Yeah, I think that is so important. I'm going to say, let me preface this by saying that my sort of philosophy, which has grown over the years, frankly, is it's not what we do for or to children in our programs, it's what happens to them. And those are not the same thing. Obviously, what we want to do is provide them with and surround them with positive experiences, great opportunities, the resources they need to grow and learn, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, whether we are successful or not depends upon what changes in those children. Okay, and in the case of healthy behaviors, what we're interested in is that they don't just participate in an activity that we've arranged for them, but that they learn to love exercising. They learn to love eating healthier. They have more knowledge about how they can do these things and why it's important. Because if that happens, we're looking at a lifelong change. If it doesn't happen, we're looking at an immediate experience. So I think we have to take the bigger view on how we want to address this.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we talk often about what happens within the 180 days of the school year or the after school program. And after school programs do have an opportunity at 3 hours a day for 180 days. That's an additionally a whole bunch of additional days that kids are getting experiences and supports that they otherwise wouldn't have. But thinking bigger into what can cause a young person to think that this is a lifestyle change for life rather than the 180 days that I'm going to be here. Because in after school, we know that young people perhaps may not be in the same program year after year, right? They move, they go somewhere, situations change. And with this pandemic, we're definitely seeing that over and over again. Another one that I wanted to focus on, creating physically and emotionally safe environments. And I often think about our Healthy Behaviors Initiative Learning Center of Pro Youth Heart, who has really taken an approach of project-based learning to make not only the relationship, but also is the project or experience that the young people are getting relevant and engaging in their world. You work with Pro Youth Heart. What have you seen that is different or that has changed the game for them?
Oh gosh, there's so much. Let me sort of see if I can condense this. I mean, this is a program that was always good, but in my view, moved from good to great. And they did it through a lot of hard work. They learned how to overcome barriers and resistance to doing a lot of things. They were very creative. They were willing to try things, even when some people were skeptical about whether they would, be worthwhile. They engaged their staff in incredible ways to buy into the whole concept of programs that really can make a difference in children's health and well-being. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, project-based learning became the vehicle through so much of which this happened. And that to me is a critical thing, because it's hands-on and minds-on. And that goes back again to the notion of what's happening to these children while they are doing things. Is this something they're following or something they're embedding in their own lives? So I think, for Pro Youth Heart, it's been extraordinary things. I mean, I've learned so much from them and spread so much of the knowledge, taking people to visit them, see, these are incredible things. Now, there's lots of other programs doing the same thing. I've done a lot of work with the World Fit for Kids over the years. I'm working with them now. They have really learned how to adapt this to a virtual environment. because we never know, do we? Who would have thought a year ago that we would be in this situation where almost everybody is engaged in distance or virtual learning? Wow, what a different environment. It's not an easy, it's a terribly challenging one. But we still have to have hands-on, minds-on learning, and figuring out how to do that, which I think these folks have done very, very well. It's a priority without question.
Yeah, and I think about, a program like Pro Youth Heart, like you said, they were already good, and then they went to a different level. And the things that I have seen from Pro Youth Heart over the years, difficult endeavor working in the Central Valley,
Sure.
right, with a migrant population, working with 50 plus after school programs and partnering with 16 or more school districts in a year's time, right? And for example, 2 years ago, they were telling me that they served over 700,000 meals in 1 year. I mean, that is a huge endeavor, right? And so I applaud them for their work. Which takes us to practice 3 about offering exciting, engaging, and meaningful learning experiences. And where I want to take you with this, Andy, because I'm always interested in your thoughts on this, is how do we reinforce and expand on classroom learning and link activities with outcomes? As you know, partnerships with school districts are stronger than ever. We are, it used to be extended learning, expanded learning, the linkages, the partnership, but there's the same kids that go the school day and then they come in the after school program. How do we do that?
Well, I think this is it's an ongoing challenge, and it's a tremendous opportunity. And I think part of it has to do with mindset. What's the relationship we want to build with schools? And I think, again, it goes back to vision. What is our vision? You're absolutely right. These are the same kids. And we used to have a sort of a standing joke in a number of places. And the joke was, wow, the kids at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, the bell rings and they come out of one and they become a totally different person. No, they don't. This is not the, Clark Kent to Superman kind of deal that goes on. They're not their kids. And one of the things I used to always say is the mark of whether you really have a successful partnership with schools is you talk to the principal and you listen for the words. And if that principal says our program rather than that program that does a great job, or that site director is terrific, or whatever else, if they say our program, they've gotten there. Now, it's not an easy thing to get there. I can absolutely attest to that. I've been through all kinds of experiences trying to make that happen. It's not easy, but I'll tell you what, we don't spend enough time, in my view, talking with principals and teachers and districts about the direct benefits that our programs provide. And during this whole period of the pandemic, this is only intensified, absolutely intensified. But let me give you a couple of examples. I did an interview with Huffington Post, a couple of years ago. And that the topic of that interview was with an author of a book called Kids Too Hungry to Learn. Well, either we don't think about it enough or we take it for, I don't know what happens, but I hadn't thought about it enough myself. What happens when kids go to school hungry? They can't concentrate well. They're not in a good mood. Think about you, if you're really hungry, or if you haven't eaten or whatever else in a while, or if you haven't eaten anything healthy, it's impossible. It affects your mood, it affects the way that you think, it affects your ability to concentrate, all of those kinds of things. Well, what we bring in, obviously, in the expanded learning field, we bring food. We bring food through the meal program, which is huge. For many of the kids in the programs I work with, that's the last meal they would have. Okay, this is huge. Okay, breakfast programs that many of us have been involved in over the years, right? Or getting ourselves engaged in partnerships with food banks, with local growers, with whatever is available to be able to bring more food into the families. These are critically important things. What's the benefit to the school? The kids are ready to learn. And one of the things that I really love as an expression is we're really in the business of ensuring that kids are healthy, fit, and ready to learn. That's what we're in the business of doing. And it's critical that we take advantage of that.
Yeah, and shout out to Danielle Sturgeon and
Yes.
at the Paso Elementary School
You got it.
after school program. Healthy, fit, and ready to learn was their vision there. And I'm glad that you talked about partnerships because, for example, when I think about food security in 2010, when the at-risk portion of the the meal or supper program was passed. When we think about a lot of our young people get free or reduced prices on breakfast, lunch, a snack, and supper. These could be 3 or 4 meals in the day that they're eating at the school site. And then the pandemic hit, and schools closed in March of earlier this year. And what we found is that food security went away, right? These 3 or 4 meals went away really quickly. First time in a long time where I saw administrators getting together over the weekend to create a meal distribution program over a weekend. The Department of Education was so gracious and helpful in creating, creating waivers to go into the summer feeding program really quickly to be able to serve meals on the go. But then the after school programs were used as partners to distribute the meals in the parking lot or in the cafeteria. And for a lot of the after school programs, they had better contact information of the families than some of our school offices did, which is amazing. And so working together, I recall working with a lot of principals and never asking for a master key or a room key. I would say, what is your safety plan for the school? Because I need to be aligned to it. Am I being invited to your fire drills? Do I get the same memo that your teachers get so that I am informed in the same way that they are around your safety practices? And then came the conversation of how do I open a classroom? Not asking for the key, right? And that's the alignment in the partnership. So, which takes me to practice 4, which is about making a commitment to community, family, and school engagement. And it takes a village to raise a child. So what can you tell us about practice 4?
Well, I think it does take a village. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, we would be foolish to try to do this on our own or independently when there's so many resources available and, so many needs that these families and the students really have. So I think the whole concept of developing and nurturing and supporting community partnerships is absolutely huge. I've had, the privilege in the last few years of working to attempt, and it's not an easy process, I have to say, but attempt to bringing in more medical and dental services to children in our programs. Because that's another whole area that we talk about, do they have enough to eat? No, and we need to continue to work on that. But, do they also, a lot of these families are uninsured or underinsured. A lot of them are immigrant families where there are issues, of course, and tragically so, with how comfortable they feel going to agencies. So we've got the opportunity here to provide information and access, and it doesn't matter if it's during the pandemic. In fact, we should be doing more of this, okay, to provide families via their students with lists of where they can go, places they can go, stuff that is free and easily accessible to them. I think we have an obligation to do that always, but particularly during this time of the pandemic. Where can they access food? And then little things like, when we have farmers markets in areas, gosh, little hints like if you go at the end of the day, you can get a lot of this stuff pretty much free. You can use EBT at most farmers markets now, right? There are ways to make this easier, and I think this is one of the things that we absolutely must do. Community partners matter in a huge, huge way.
So Andy, where I think, the guides that you have put out over the years and the work that the Center for Collaborative Solutions has done over decades, in partnership with communities, is the idea of vetted resources from trusted sources. What I continue to find is that the resources can be available, but that doesn't mean that you have the trust of the community that you serve for them to trust that that resource is worth their time, right? So it's not only about the great resource that's available, but if the site coordinator from an after school program tells them that this farmer's market is the place to go, or that you should connect with this food bank, or that this person has a free curriculum, that's the way to make the connection. What have you seen around the state and your work nationally around, how important making these connections are and gaining that trust of that community?
Well, first of all, I believe that relationships are everything. Yeah, they just are. And, that takes time to develop those. But boy, what I've seen, in so many, I think I could say almost every program, that's about 200 programs I've worked with, that almost every program has a staff that is connected with parents in one way or another. Now, that there's a whole spectrum of that, but I think those connections happen, and they happen particularly when you hire from the neighborhoods or people who have the same past experience or circumstances or situations. When we're working on getting dental support into kids, it was one of the ways to do that is to get people to agree to come in and have their kids go through the physical exams for their teeth and so on and so forth, was that the staff would support it. They said, look, this is a really good thing. I'm doing this myself, or the medical kinds of testing and so on. But beyond that, I think it's access to any of these things. I've worked an awful lot, and I know you have, of folks who were, they were also, taking, advantage of a lot of the things that were available, for food stamps, using the old term for that, but, and that kind of stuff. When there are those connections that, or people who, share the same cultural backgrounds, this is what makes it credible, just like you're saying, and I think it's a critical piece.
Yeah, in that relationship building is what the key here. Because for me, when I think about, what after school and expanded learning is today, I think of the director of the expanded learning division at the Department of Education, Michael Funk. Well, when we were talking about the mid 90s or the early 2000s, he was actually running programs in San Francisco at the Sunset Neighborhood Beacon Center. Yeah. So he personally understands what that means, right? When he had his staff go visit programs all over the state so that they can understand what we all learned, what frontier rural was, and how sometimes a coyote or a fire in the rural area can shut down your entire program, that you don't have a Walmart that you can just go ask for local funding. Those things, being connected to the community that you serve, matter. And Michael Funk really talks about, leading with love and really understanding that. One of the relationships that I really appreciate is how these guides came to be. So for example, you writing it, obviously, but without the relationship with the California Department of Public Health and really the vision of Sue Forrester being a visionary to make this work and connecting the dots to say, what can we do for young people and families out there, right? So how, these interconnections matter, don't they?
Absolutely, they matter. And I'm glad you brought up Sue Forrester and the others who are at the California Department of Public Health. It's just the Healthy California Initiative. It's amazing how important that was in all of this, and I think the way that we put that guide together was to bring people together. I don't know that anybody's ever had a more extensive or credible list of advisory people serving in advisory capacities. And all of that was enormously important, to bring people in from various sectors to say, this is what we need to have happen. This is what we see happening. These are the gaps that we have. And these are the exemplary practices that are coming forward.
Yeah, and the last question that I have for you about, this whole partnership and engaging not only like students and families through the pandemic, right? We have seen that now distance learning is a new experience for a lot of us, from teachers to parents. I didn't really realize fourth grade math was this difficult, unlike when I learned it when I was in fourth grade. So we're all struggling, we're all learning. But how have after school programs specifically been crucial to being engaging, doing it through technology, connecting with families? It sounds like they have the recipe because they were already doing all of this before this distance learning thing. What have you seen out there in terms of the importance of what after school program staff can offer through this distance learning phase?
Well, I think that the thing that's the toughest for children and young people at this point in time, is tough for everybody, is that they're really not seeing their friends. I mean, and this has been a long time now, 8 months into this process, and God knows how long we're going to go with it. But I think one of the things that the virtual learning opportunities that programs are providing is for them to see their friends, in this experience online. Now, that's not as good as being there in person, but it's a lot better than other things. I think that's one of the major things. The second is they know there are supportive adults in their lives. And these connections that they've had previously with these people is really critical in my view. And the third thing, of course, is that if they're offering, which so many of them are now, exciting and engaging experiences that these kids can have, wow, that gives them, it's an oasis in my view. I mean, a lot of us can get a little tired of, hours of Zoom meetings, but for these kids, this is during a period of time. Here's something they can do that is fun. It's exciting for them. They can learn something. They can see their friends, albeit it's on screen, and they can see the adults that they care about. I think we are not losing as much. In fact, we are contributing more than we probably ever thought we could in this environment.
Yeah. The one thing that my wife is a teacher. She's been teaching for 21 years now. And, she's in the next room right now, like doing her class, right, through Zoom. And it's difficult for all of us and for the families and the teachers and everyone involved and the administrators. And so we're all learning. And as I think about like teacher pathways, right, after school and summer learning programs provide a great opportunity for a teacher pathway to create the teachers of tomorrow, to partner and to learn from classroom teachers. And as we're all reimagining what education can be, when it's time to return, I don't think it can return to the same way that it used to be. Now that we know there are additional challenges or new ways of doing things. So I want to turn it over, Andy, to Practice 5, because you know that this is the one that's near and dear to my heart, and it's around strengthening food security. Obviously, because of this pandemic, we have seen what it looks like out there in terms of food insecurity. What can you tell us in terms of the practices of what after school programs have done, the work that you have done around food security and partnerships around tackling the food security problem?
Well, I think, first it's really important to understand what food insecurity is. Food insecurity is when you don't have enough healthy food to eat. It's a simple definition of a very complex situation. And, income or the amount of money that you have coming in certainly impacts that in a great way, but so do other things, right? It's not just about whether you've got enough money to purchase food, it's what kind of food you are purchasing. And that leads to the, real serious issues of, are healthy foods available in local communities that we serve? And very commonly, that is not the case. That you find food deserts where there simply aren't supermarkets or things of that sort. And so what you have in their place are corner markets, which predominantly, not exclusive, but predominantly sell food that we would, and beverages we would not consider to be particularly healthy. Okay, so we have that issue, accessibility and affordability. Both are issues that we're facing. So we've got to do everything that we can. Now, I want to give you an example of what's happening at the moment at A World Fit for Kids in LA, okay? Is taking what we built on earlier, and I think we're going to take it to the next level. And this is how it works. In the programs that they work with, they're starting with high school, and they expect that they will get it through all grade levels relatively soon. They have cooking classes, right? And the cooking classes, which go back to what you're talking about hands-on, kinds of experiences. These are, things like cooking simple snacks they're healthy for you, right? And, that we presume that people might be able to afford, and then you can do this together and so on, make it a family thing, because obviously we want to influence the families when it comes to food and food security. And that means preparation, it means what they're purchasing and so on and so forth. But anyway, the next step to that is not just to do these on screen with the kids, but then to raise the money privately to be able to provide once a week to give the families of the kids who are participating in this the food they need to prepare the next snacks or the next meal. This is not a very expensive proposition. I was more than willing to make the first investment in that myself because I believe in it. But then I think we can raise, and other programs can as well, enough money to make this kind of thing work. So the food is purchased and delivered by the staff. It then gets the family, when we go back to talking about family engagement, gets them involved in doing this with the kids, and it gets them to think that there are alternatives to chips and sodas. There are alternatives to other kinds of things. And, so I think that's making a big difference.
And those things matter. And quickly, and I'm glad that you mentioned the World Fit for Kids. I always go back to you either have to have a pioneer, a champion, an influencer, someone who can reach the grassroots and grass tops. So shout out, to Normandy Nye, who has been working on this for years and years through, Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign. Sure. Through, now Bill Fennessy is over there at World Fit for Kids leading the high school programs. And these are folks that we consider family, right? That make things happen no matter what community they're in. They know they have the pulse in the community and they know how to help in very intentional ways. Because we're running out of time, I want to take us to, practice 6, which I think you have built an entire career around, which is securing adequate and sustainable funding. And it's something that, a lot of people that I talk to say, well, I'm not in charge of that, right? Like that's somebody else's job. Like a fund developer does that.
Yeah.
How do we do this? And why is it all of our responsibility to care about this?
Well, it is all of our responsibility. Okay. It's hard to, secure new funding if you don't have a quality program. And how do you get a quality program? You have quality people doing quality work, having a quality impact. But I think, as I've said in all my work on developing this approach to funding, the funding must be balanced, diversified, and sustainable. And the way you get there is you stop talking about what you're doing and you start talking about the impact of what you're doing is having on the communities that you serve and the kids and adults that you serve. So it's a change. It's about thinking differently about what we're doing. And if we look, for example, at the Healthy Behaviors Initiative and all the work that everybody is doing in that, That's having a huge impact on communities, an impact on the children, an impact on schools, everywhere you look. And so we really, really want, people to think differently about how they approach fund development. And I would say that I've always used the word fund development as opposed to fundraising, because it's not a one-off experience or event. It needs to be something to be sustainable. It must be balanced and diversified. You must be drawing in money from various sources. And the toughest thing that I've experienced is getting people to think beyond ACES funding, state funding, or federal 21st Century Community Learning Centers funding and saying that's enough. Or when there are, challenges that come up, when people say, oh, I don't have the money, please don't talk to me, or do talk to me. It's okay. Talk to me about that, because I'm going to say, when we're out of this pandemic, because I've done it for so many years before, you come with me and let's go talk to the parents and to the kids. You tell them you can't get the money. No, I'm not going to do that. That's heartbreaking to me. I will absolutely do everything I can to ensure that programs have the money. So it's a mindset, like everything else in the work that we do. It's how do we see the future and how do we manifest the future? How do we co-create the future? So, you look at how you can do it. It's the sort of yes, I can approach that you take. It's not about, gee, there's too many struggles, problems. It's not my job. Well, it is. It's all of our jobs. We have the privilege and opportunity of being in this field. And with that comes, all the courage that we can muster to be able to be the change, to make the change that we want to see in the world.
So Andy, the great Steve Fowler, the great thinker, Steve Fowler, he always talks about how we and expanded learning are insular, and we keep, trying to get the same people who already care about this issue to care some more about this issue. However, we have perhaps not done a good enough job in convincing those who don't have a stake in this, right? And so when I think about, people who tell me, well, don't you already get $730 million a year? Why do you need more? It takes me back to the conversations that you and Carla Sanger used to have about what is the rate per child? And, 20 years ago, it was $7.50 per child, which at 112,500 per year, that equated to 83.444 kids per day that you could serve in a school that perhaps had 300 or 400 kids of population. So it's great that we're serving 900,000 kids right now, but there are 7 million kids that perhaps could use the opportunity of an expanded learning program. What do you say to people that say you already have enough money to do this? Why do you keep asking for more?
Well, first of all, it doesn't reach anywhere near the numbers of children who really need to be in these programs. There's no question about that. That's the number one thing that I think matters. But, number two, let's stop doing the math on let me tell you how that 112.5 came about. It came about when Carla Sanger and I had just celebrated the fact that we'd made some real progress in getting the legislation through. And we were drinking wine, and we said, well, how much, when we talk about to the Department of Ed as they're setting this up, how much should these grants be for? We had a couple glasses of wine, and we said, oh, let's see, it's costing us about $350 a day, and we've got 100, 150 kids at each site and so on. Let's just do some simple math on a napkin, which we did. And it was 112.5 that we came up with. Then the next year, when the new legislation included middle schools, this is for elementary in the beginning, and then middle schools, we said, okay, let's say, how about 150? So this wasn't that we sat down and calculated everything and said, this is the ceiling. The other thing that to me is critical, and I think you know me well enough to know this is true. I never wanted after-school education and safety funding to be more than core funding, ever, okay? I believe in balanced and diversified funding, okay? I believe in that profoundly. I believe that all your eggs in one basket is suicidal for a program, and it is certainly not a very a financially responsible way to approach things. With the original legislation, and I know I've gotten a lot of, people who are not happy with what I did, I didn't want the 30%, okay, that we put into that legislation to be in kind ever. I wanted it to be in cash. Okay. And the reason for that is it strengthens programs, it gives more flexibility, in what you can do in a program. And it's the right thing to do. Okay. I think most of us have retirement. Hopefully, we all have some sort of retirement kinds of things lined up in one way or another, or if not, we're going to have them. Nobody in their right mind would put all their money in one area. Okay, we've been through enough to see that just is foolhardy. Same thing is true with this, that if we want to sustain these kinds of programs and these kinds of opportunities that we provide, we have got to make a commitment that we will do everything we can to make the quality of our programs show up in the impact that we're having and use that impact to garner balanced and diversified and therefore sustainable funding.
Andy, this is why I value so much the Center for Collaborative Solutions and having these conversations, because not a lot of people know these stories. I mean, can you imagine, right? Like if you get a chance to sit down with, all these stories of expanded learning, and there used to be a saying that we used to fly the plane while we were building it.
Right.
And now everybody's asking for intentionality and consistency in policies, practice, and in environmental changes, right? Mm-hmm. And so as we think through that process, I want to talk now a little bit about what the future holds, perhaps, for expanded learning around health and wellness. The California After School Network has been doing a lot of great work over many years, since 2006 or 7, on a lot of areas, but their latest, and you and I are blessed to sit on the leadership team of the California After School Network, and we have agreed that whole child health and wellness is the priority that California After School Network needs to focus on. So that's their new strategic plan. That's what they're focusing on. And for the last 8 months, they brought together over 150 people, diverse communities from all over the state. 400 people, chimed in, and they have created their statement of strategic direction, in which whole child health and wellness at the core is how do we use these after school and summer learning programs as community hubs to leverage, like you mentioned, other resources, dental, vision, mental health, food security, sports and recreation, academic enrichment. How do you see that playing out moving forward?
Well, I'm very optimistic that this is going to make a big difference. But I'm going to tell you something also, but this is the resurrection of an old idea. It's that sort of, everything goes around.
The community schools model.
But, for those of you, and there may not be anybody who's on this webinar who's old enough to remember this, but Healthy Start was a very important program throughout California. And it was a well-funded program. And sadly, and this is ironic as well, what really made it difficult for them to thrive in the way that they were was the advent of after-school programming and the money that was put there. Because some of that money essentially went to after-school programming and not to Healthy Start. Now, there are still some Healthy Start places, but here's what they did. Along with Citizen Schools and others, is that they focused on community schools. And I think that's what we're coming back to at this point. And I think that that's why the work of the California After School Network is so incredibly important now. We need to really rethink what we're doing. We are not simply expanded learning programs. We need to be the driver in making it, the sort of the the hub, the school becomes the hub of the community where folks can access the kinds of things that they need, no matter what those may be. So I'm all in favor of community schools, all in favor. And I think that's the way we end up providing the resources and the opportunities and access, easy access to them for the children and young people and families we serve.
You know, and since I mentioned Bill Fennessy a little bit earlier, I was just having a conversation with him, I believe last week, and you know, the thought came to mind of those great California After School Network conferences, the Step Up Conference and the middle school conference as well, and they had a conference for just high school practitioners when assets came to be, right? After school education and safety for teens came to be. They were sort of like there was not a lot for them, right? A lot of the curriculum, a lot of the trainings were done for elementary and middle school, but not a lot was done for high school. And I think about the high school model and how it's a community hub, right? The site coordinator plays sort of a community manager that brings resources into the school community and then worries about managing what sort of services young people get in that community. And I think that there's already some great models out there that we can continue to learn from. And I'm very hopeful because the next generation of leaders in the expanded learning field, right? A lot of them have grown up in the expanded learning field. Yesterday, you know, we celebrated nationally Lights On After School. And I was so happy and thrilled to see, for example, you know, the leadership awards from the Department of Education being given to Shannon Roth from SAC Chinese Community Service Centers in Region 3, Oscar Munquia from Region 6 and the Give Every Child a Chance program, Aurelia Gillis in Region 11 from Asana Academies. And so the field is in good hands.
Yes.
But what I want to make sure that we understand and have the humility in that there's a lot of knowledge that a lot of things have already happened. And it's through stories like today that we can learn a lot what's already available and we can use as a continuation point or a starting or a restarting point. And then utilizing the new voices in the field, utilizing young people's voices in the field to bring these to bear fruit. So I want to ask you couple of last questions, and I've asked the folks in the webinar to submit any questions they may have on the Q&A box. I haven't seen any yet, and there was one which we already talked about a little bit. But how do you see this policy to practice influences practice to policy or vice versa working out in such a vast landscape like California expanded learning?
Well, you know, I think this is, you got to have both. I mean, a lot of, and there's an intersection of them all the time, whether we recognize it or not. My background, as you know, my educational background is my doctorate is in political science. So whereas people are saying a lot of the time now, I hate politics, I love politics because I understand what politics is and I understand how important it is. Politics is about values, and it's about who's going to win and lose in values, whose policies are going to be put in practice that makes our lives better or inhibits our ability to have better lives. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna speak for a second to this election, because people are, I mean, this is, in my view, the election of my lifetime, okay? And certainly I think of everybody's lifetime. So when we talk about policies, we are talking about those people who are elected to office at all levels, from the president on down to the local folks in your communities. Those are the people who are the decision makers, okay? And they will influence it. And we've certainly seen that, when it comes to expanded learning. We've seen it at the state legislature, that we are continually going back to them. Do we need to do a better job, okay, in influencing them or attempting to influence them at all levels? Absolutely. School districts, okay? These are elected positions as well. We need to build relationships with them. We need to put the people into office who get it, who really understand what the needs of our communities are. We need to put people into office at all levels so that we're doing the things that matter to us, not just so we get the policies that are supportive of us, but we get the values that are supportive of the things that we're doing. I'm working an awful lot of my time is now devoted to the election and has been for the last few months, because I, like all of us, I think, really care, okay, that we see the kinds of policies now and in coming up in the future that are going to make a difference. They're going to support us because it's the right thing.
And Andy, I want to highlight the point that these relationships matter, not just when we need something,
correct,
but all the time. So
yes.
It starts for me with the Healthy Behaviors Initiative Guide, which is available at the Center for Collaborative Solutions website, ccscenter.org. And it really is called the Changing Lives, Saving Lives, a step-by-step guide to developing exemplary practices. And it really does give you the talking points. Because for me, it was about when I was having conversations with principals, do I have my talking points in order that are going to not only be good, but align with his or her vision for what they want the school environment to be? Do I know how to speak to school board members? Have they visited my program? Do I not make it that that's somebody else's job, but do all of my staff, the line staff, know how to speak to everyone? Do the students know how to speak about their program in a way, because they're our biggest influencers, and with social media even more? Whatever they say to their parents at the end of the after school program, that's what their parents believe, other than what they see for the 5 minutes that they're signing them out. So it's being able to be intentional and consistent about messaging, and then so that those folks in decision-making positions can carry that message through a megaphone to a larger audience or vision. So I don't see any questions, but I just want to say, Andy, how grateful I am to have had this relationship with you for so long. It's been 25 years, Andy, believe it or not.
That's right.
And we have done so much work together, and I have learned so much, and I am so humble and grateful. For a lot of us that grew up in after school, these guides are not only just something that we do as professional development, but something that we utilize subconsciously all the time, because at the heart, they become our own core values of how we see the world, right? So I encourage all of you on the webinar to not only, work with others in partnership, but also learn from others in partnership, because it's through these conversations and through these stories where we can lift each other up and make each other better, and in turn build communities. Andy, any last words for the group? We've had a fantastic group of attendees that have been listening, that have been absorbing the knowledge. What would you leave them with today?
Well, I like to leave them with this. I am so proud and excited about the upcoming generations. I really am. I'm now fortunately in a position where almost everybody in the field is younger than I. And that's kind of an interesting place to be for me. And I think that it's so exciting. When I work with, younger people, and when I say younger, it's practically anybody who is, but I look at the young people who are in their 20s and 30s and the incredible work that they are doing. When I see the changes that they're making, I see their desire to learn more, to do more, to be more. I mean, this is amazing to me. I just feel that that the future that we can all co-create together, it's going to be left in really good hands. So my advice to everybody is, let me just leave with these words. Think big, please, always think big. When people say you can't do something, just do it. You can do it, okay? That to me is critical. Think strategically. How do you connect dots? How do you look at what's likely to impact whatever else? Okay, take the time to do that, to sit back and reflect and think about that. Be collaborative. And of course, so much of what I've learned about that came from the Center for Collaborative Solutions. So much came from Janet and from the others and from you. Okay, to really know what collaboration means. Okay, that you really think together, work together, create together, co-create together. And to be intentional. Please, I beg you, be intentional about what you do. Whether that is, looking at decisions that you're making, or it's looking at the future you want to create, or how you go about it, or how you spend your time, and the rest of it. Be intentional, right? Because it makes all the difference in the world. Together we can do this, and we are doing it, and we are going to see a whole new world when we come out of this pandemic. Let's use this time to prepare ourselves to make an even bigger difference than we ever have.
Thank you. And I want to thank the Center for Collaborative Solutions. Thank you for hosting this series of webinars. All of the webinar recordings are available at ccscenter.org. So you can always check them out there or share them with your colleagues and friends from there. Andy, as always, it is a pleasure and an honor to speak with you. I learned so much each and every time. And to all of the attendees that joined us this afternoon and on a Friday, thank you so much for your time and for all of the great work that you're doing in the communities that you serve. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.